Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Talk to Me, the show where I get my friends to talk to me. As you can see, we're back on Zoom. No, we're not in lockdown again, but my guest is all the way across the sea. He's all the way in America. Pastor Erik, thank you for joining me today, sir.
It's definitely a privilege to be here.
I met Pastor Erik through my Bible college courses at Veritas. He's taught about 4 of the courses I've taken. And I thought a couple of months back, you know what, I should probably get to know this guy since I've been seeing him via videos. I should probably get to know him. So we had a chat recently and you graciously agreed to jump onto the podcast. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to be here.
So why don't you introduce yourself to the people? Tell us who you are. Tell us where you're from.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Erik McKay, as was mentioned. I am married for almost 7 years here to my wife, Carrie. We have 2 young sons. Ezra, he is almost 3 years old. And then we have my second son, his name's Elias, and he is actually born on my wife's birthday. So they share a birthday. He is 7 months old. And so our life is definitely pretty exciting. And I teach, obviously, as was mentioned, at Veritas Baptist College, as well as I've been a youth pastor for 13 years, and I'm transitioning now to be a lead pastor. So I'm really looking forward to that. So currently I'm in Jacksonville, Florida in the United States, and I'm going to be transitioning to Dayton, Ohio. And I started my ministry in Minnesota. And so obviously, just to kind of describe it for you guys there, we would have 6 feet of snow pretty much every winter. We'd have 40 below windshield factor. I mean, it was cold. And so they call it the frozen tundra. I've heard people call it Minnesota. But anyways, it's cold. And I live in Florida now, and people are wondering, why am I going back up to Ohio? But that's just the way the Lord works, and the Lord's been working in our hearts. And I went to Bible college in 2008 and 2009. And then I got my bachelor's and master's. Then I just received a second master's just this past year from Veritas as well. So I'm just really looking forward to seeing what God does here for our family in the future.
Mate, so you're a very busy man, that's for sure. But let's take it back before we get into everything, into the pastorship and into youth ministry. You come from Minnesota. Now, like you said, it's a very snowy place, very cold over there, very different for us in Australia where we don't see snow whatsoever.
Right.
What was it like growing up in Minnesota? What was it like over there?
You know, it was pretty much everything I knew until I went off to college, and then obviously came down here to Florida. But it's unique, just kind of the difference. And we may talk about this, even the difference between America and Australia, but there's a huge difference even between Minnesota and Florida, and just even the people. I felt like a lot. In our states, we obviously have different states that are a little bit more liberal, and we have some that are a little bit more conservative. In Minnesota, it was more of the liberal state. And if anyone has followed news, Minnesota was kind of the center point of a lot of the racism and some of the things that were going on. And then, Florida is very conservative. And if you know anything about Florida, we have one of the most conservative governors, and he's probably going to be one of the candidates for president coming up here for America. But it's just the people, and they're just so different. And I don't know. I don't know if weather does this to you, but it's almost like the people, it seems like in Minnesota at times, were a little more cold to you, just kind of in there. Even you go out and you try to reach people. At first, they're kind of got their guard up a little bit. And in Florida, there's a little bit more of a laid back. It's slow moving. That's kind of known, like the South's kind of known for that. And then, the North is a little bit more fast paced. So even in my youth groups, the 2 different youth groups I've had, it was kind of different. So growing up, it's like, I didn't really know that it was a lot different. And so I would say the last 3 years or so, I've really, seen, wow, there's some differences between Minnesota and Florida, but I'm definitely more of a suburb type guy. I'm not really middle of the country or big city. So I that's what I liked about Minnesota.
Yeah.
But Jacksonville is just so huge. It's a little big for me.
So what was it like growing up around that? I mean, like you said, you wouldn't have noticed it being there, but coming out of it and taking a look back, how do you think that developed you as a person, seeing all that around you?
Yeah, I think, for me, it's I've had to be more conscientious of just people. Like, I feel like I even now have, a lot of times it's helped me to have a different perspective and try to have a perspective that, you know, not everyone thinks the same way I do. And
Yeah.
so sometimes even just, when I was there, it's just so easy to be, in a sense, cold towards people. Like, for example, I grew up in a family that, like, we didn't hug people.
Really?
Wasn't our thing. Like I
Okay.
said, it was a little bit more, and you come down here and everyone's so, first time coming up to church, and you stand in line, everyone's giving you bear hugs. And so I think for me, a big difference, and one thing that I've learned is um just loving people more on that of an intimate level. And I cared about people. It's funny, in church, you get up there and you preach, and you know you get a lot of, like, head nods, and down here it's like people are, they're into the message. And it could be, maybe it's just the church, the
Yeah.
difference in churches, but they're that responsiveness. And I just feel like there's a difference just even in the spirit, and so there's churches spend so much of my life. So, I don't know if you can kind of compare necessarily Minnesota and Florida, but it's just the different styles of churches that I grew up in. There's just more of a warm, welcoming, and I just feel like that's a lot of how Jesus was. And
Yeah.
just how, just loving God, loving people, and just that genuineness. And it's something that, looking back, it's like, man, there's some things I wish maybe I was a little too harsh, or in some of these ways. And maybe there's some things that I could go back. In fact, my first year here in Florida, I just went down a list, and there's, like, I wrote a list of 8 to 10 people that I just need to write and say, I'm sorry, I wronged you. Would you forgive me? Because maybe a response that I had, or I pushed my point of view and didn't take time to kind of see where they were at. So that's one thing that kind of helped open my eyes, kind of moving down here.
Yeah, I guess the culture difference really does put a shock into the system and makes you reevaluate everything.
For
How
sure.
important do you find that now, seeing that, okay, I have seen cultural differences, I have seen the difference in myself and what I need to change. How has that changed the way you look at how you deal with yourself in reevaluating things, I guess?
Yeah, I think for one, is not taking myself too seriously. You know,
Mhm.
I think a lot of times, that was it. And it's like, it's understanding. And I think it's just really the gospel. I think so much we try to achieve and try to please, and the wrong person,
Yeah.
and then, also realizing that, God loves us, and he already sent his son, and once we're saved, we're always saved. And there's nothing that can change how much or how little he loves us. He loves us, that's not changing. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so I think the perspective of that is just kind of like I was saying about not taking myself too seriously, and just really enjoying. At times it's like I would get so stressed out, or so, worked up, because, and I couldn't get my mind off of certain situations that were so difficult. And I think down here, it's just learning kind of to relax. And, you know, um, the key word I said when I moved down here is that someone asked, well, what's the difference? And I was like, freedom. I feel like I have freedom in Christ, freedom in
Mm.
my relationship with others. Freedom to do what God has called me to do. And,
Yeah.
and when you can realize that, and you realize the freedom that you have in the gospel, and you figure out what your true identity is through the gospel. So many people in our world struggle with identity, and I was one of those people. I was one of those people that struggled with that. So that's one thing that's impacted me, is, again, not taking myself too seriously, understanding and finding my identity through Christ, and realizing that there's no one or nothing that can change that, and being satisfied with that.
Yeah. So let's talk about that then. How did you find your identity in Christ? How did you become a Christian?
Yeah, so for me, I this is my journey is a little bit different, because,
Mm.
and I know some people may have a similar. I grew up in a Christian home, and so,
Okay.
at times you think, like, I should have this amazing gospel story that I should be able. And I think, you had taken my personal evangelism class.
Yeah.
Everybody's gospel story is amazing,
Yeah, that's
whether
right.
you grew up in a Christian home, or whether you had a broken life, and maybe you got into trouble, and you got in some miraculous way you came back to to the Lord. Listen, everybody's salvation story is miraculous, and that's because of Jesus. And for me, I got saved at a young age, and I was saved when I was 5 years old. And with that, there's come a lot of things along the way, and I still remember it clear as day. I've had many people, well, didn't you get you? I'm sure you had assurance of salvation at some point. Well, I had assurance of my salvation when I was 5. When I
Wow.
got saved, that I was
Yeah.
sure. And so for me, and I know that's not the same way for everybody else, but I asked Jesus into my heart, and I've shared my story. I still remember I was praying. I had some Batman sheets, and I remember it was after a Wednesday service. My grandpa preached, and we had bunk beds, and my dad had talked to me, and we went and we prayed, and my life was changed forever there. Now, obviously, as you start this sanctification process, you start this process of what is the Christian life, this marathon. There's obviously bumps and things in the road, and I would get my eyes on different things, almost in a sense pharisaical, of thinking, this is how I'm supposed to look, or this
Mhm.
is what I'm supposed to say.
Yeah.
Listen, I could do that. I could tell you all the Christian lingo, but finding my gospel identity and understanding in that moment when I put my faith and trust in Jesus Christ, my identity was now a believer. I was a Christian, and nothing could take that away. And my as much as I may stray, or my position in Christ doesn't change. And so at times I've tried to seek for my identity in other things, when there was no point to seek. My identity was through Christ. And that's the biggest thing, I think, of when you're thinking about your gospel identity. And I'm not sure if you've read the book yet, but Carrie Schmidt's book, Stop Trying, is
Mm.
a perfect book on gospel identity. And instead of trying to please the audience of many, ultimately it's the audience of one that truly matters.
Yeah, that's right. And I'd like to get into that then, because you're right. I think Christians, especially Christians that have grown up in the church and have testimonies similar to ours in getting saved at a young age, feel that they do need to find their identity in the church or in
For sure.
someone else, right? And that's where the judgmental or the Pharisaical sort of culture does come into play. And that
Right.
does come into play in a lot of lives. And then when Christians start growing up, they hit their teen years and they start thinking, I don't want this. It's too hard a
Right.
life to live. How
Mhm.
detrimental is that to a church? How detrimental is that to a Christian themselves?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's extremely detrimental. And I think I've been on this probably kick for a while.
Mm,
I think a lot of that is a discipleship problem.
okay.
And for me it's like I look at our churches, and I just feel like we're not discipling well. You know,
All right.
when we get saved, right? We're saved, we're baptized. What happens? We can have a church, and I'm convicted of this myself. All right, so we've been able. I came down here to Florida, and we started these ministries, and we started seeing kids get saved like crazy, and it's great. And
Mm,
salvation is the most important decision anybody can make, so I'm not here to try to water that down or anything. That's great, but the problem is, as soon as we see these people saved, yeah, we may get them into the baptism waters. The percentages maybe even lower than that. We've seen several of these young people saved. Then what's next? That's the thing.
yeah.
And so for us, and so we have these people that have been newly saved. They're newborn babes, right? And we're talking about spiritual growth here, and how do they get from being the newborn babes, like we had a lecture in this in our class, and to that spiritual maturity, to where they then can go and start sharing what they've learned with somebody else. um to me, it's like churches aren't doing it. They
Yeah.
may be seeing people saved, because why? They're important in the numbers. That's what they think is important. Well, I have 100 people saved. Well, I'd rather you have one person that gets saved, uh, follows the Lord in believers baptism, and then walks through life and with you, alongside of you, gets understands what it means, and that they don't have to be out here trying to please man or live up to a certain standard. Ultimately, it's all about Jesus, and that's what it's about. And having people go through the fundamentals of the faith with them, and help them to build a foundation. And when you do that, when you have that, whether that's helping them through small groups, one-on-one type of discipleship, or whatever works best for you, as you are connecting with that one person, and then you start to see, and they have that foundation, so that when maybe some things come up, they can always go back to that firm foundation, just like the story in the Bible of the wise man and the foolish man. The wise man built his house on the rock, and the foolish man built his house on the sand. It's all about your foundation. And that's what we're doing, is we have all of these Christians that are going through life, and they're questioning, and they're trying to strive for excellence in what man thinks of them, because from the beginning they never got that discipleship or that mentoring that they needed. And so it's one thing that I'm so passionate about, because we have great churches that are preaching the gospel, churches that are seeing people saved, and very quickly you're seeing many of these people that are newly saved or baptized leaving the church because they are not getting the proper discipleship in their life. And it takes time, it takes effort on both the discipler and the disciplee. And so to me, a lot of this, what we're talking about in this gospel identity, can be solved if we do exactly what Jesus talks about in Matthew 28. And there's a reason he's not just talking about salvation and baptism, but he's also talking about teaching and that discipleship process.
I think that's big. And I think that's something that people tend to forget about discipleship, right? Is they think it's a 12-week course. You finish off that 12-week course, and then they're done. They're good to go. You leave them as it be.
Absolutely.
When that's completely, wrong. And that's besides the fact. There was one particular guy that I had the blessing to disciple, and he and I went through the 12-week course. We loved life. He ended up getting baptized, joining the church. And 3-4 years later, he and I are still in contact. We are still talking about some of the issues we were talking about back then, but now we're talking about different issues that have come up. And that's the thing that I think we forget about as churches, as people that go to church, is that we're there for each other. We're there to help each other through this. And it can be so easy to lose sight of the main purpose and the main goal of the church.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, there's a big thing going around here in our churches. Who's your one? I think we're so quick to try to get 20 people that we're doing this with, and yes, we want to have this change the world mentality. All of us would love to do that, be a Billy Graham, or, be, DL Moody. It's people that are reaching millions, and not everyone's going to be that. So just reach your one. And who's your one? And that's important. You can reach your millions, but what impact are they going to have on the world if they're not being discipled? But imagine if you have your one, and I'm reaching my one. And I used to be like that. I used to be like, I want to try to influence, and it became a lot of quantity over quality. And and what you're saying is, because when you take that time, that's exactly right. You have 12 weeks, sure. But then, and it may look different after those 12 weeks, but there's still that connection. I'm helping guys I discipled buy cars. I'm helping guys, those are the types of things that we're helping them practically through life, but also during those times, we're teaching them different things spiritually as well.
Yeah. Biblical values and biblical principles to help them get through life, rather than them just being words on a page or a list of rules that need to be followed.
Absolutely.
And that's the big thing about Christianity that I constantly rave about, is the biggest difference about Christianity and religion is we're striving to have a relationship here. We're not striving to follow a set of rules, or we're not striving to make sure that we tick off the list. We want to strive to make sure that our lives are completely different. The Ray I was yesterday is not going to be the same Ray tomorrow. That's the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So how'd you get into ministry in general? When did God call you? When did you get out there?
Yeah, for sure. So I was a junior in high school, their missions conference.
Sorry, junior is year 11 here, guys.
Yes, 11th grade. Yes, year 11. Sorry.
Sorry, we're very different, and we'll get into that.
I know. And I have to remember that too, So yeah, just correct me on anything. So, we understand. I remember going to the Philippines, and they were like, yeah, they're year 10, but they were graduating. And so it was weird for me, so I have to forgive me for,
Nah, you're all right. Have you ever been here? Have you ever been to Australia?
no, I want to, as soon as stuff opens back up that makes it easier, that my wife and I would both dream of being there.
Mate,
So
you're coming straight down to Sydney, and we'll
yeah,
show
I'd
you what
love
it's
to.
like down here. We drive on the right side of the road.
Let's go.
We do a lot of things better than you guys. That's for sure.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
come on. I want some of the food. That's what I want.
Mate, don't you worry. We'll get you guys fed up. We'll get you guys fed up. The one thing you guys do better than us for sure, though, is sports.
Yeah,
I have to say, mate, your sports programs are unreal.
yeah, it's crazy. I mean, and I'm a sports fanatic, obviously, and I know you know that, but it's just interesting to me though, even all the different sports around the world. I think that's why in Olympics, when we do Olympics, I always think it's interesting. We have the World Series, but it's all teams from America.
Yeah,
How is that really the World Series? And but you have these different things, and like I think we had talked before about rugby, and you have different sports that are just all over the different the world, that are so different. And so it's always cool when the Olympics brings that together. And it always seems like USA and Australia battle it out in the pool, and
that's it,
so
mate.
that's always fun to watch.
That's
So
it. I love that you guys are world champions every time you guys win a comp, whether it's NBA,
absolutely.
NFL. It's the
Yeah,
National League, but you're the world champions. Sure.
exactly. We're the
No
world
worries.
champions of America.
No worries. Okay,
I
so
never I never got it either.
so you're in year 11. You're a junior, and
Yep. So
God's calling you.
I'm junior in high school, 11th year 11, and missions conference. We have as a pastor actually preaching from Oklahoma, one of the states here, and he and honestly, I don't remember a whole lot of what was going on. I just know God, the whole service was working on my heart, and
Mm.
I didn't know what direction it would go. But at that point, I really felt like God wanted me to preach, and so I went forward, and I prayed, and I said, God, I just surrendered my life. I said, whatever you want, whatever that looks like, whether that's in full-time ministry where I'm focused solely just on ministering to people, whether it's I have a secular job to where, and then in my free time, I do whatever with the best I can to minister that way. And pretty quickly after that, we took some trips to see some universities and different colleges around here, and I ended up going to a school out in California, and every summer I'd come home and I'd work at our summer camp, and I really just started to begin to have a love for people, but also for young people. And I just remember I'd stay up almost every night talking to different kids, and just realizing the stuff that they were going through. And
Mm.
one, it helped me to realize how fortunate I am, with how I grew up. And then secondly, it showed me the need for people to work with young people. Not everyone is created to do it,
Yeah.
but the Lord really put it on my heart, and I had a passion. So as I was getting through my first year or so of school, I started to transition to do youth ministry major. And I just have gone from there, and did my master's in Christian education, because I always have had a desire to teach. And then as soon as I left college, I went back to actually my home church at the time in Minnesota, and I started working as a youth pastor there, and did it for 10 years, just loved on the kids. And then I thought I was done. I thought it was over. I thought I was, at the point I was basically going to just train to be a pastor, come down to Florida. Just within a couple weeks, the pastor's like, I really want you to be my youth pastor. And didn't know how long it would last. Then, as we've talked about briefly here, is that I feel like the Lord is leading me into this direction, and looking forward to being a lead pastor. So
That's awesome. Now, before we do get into the lead pastor stuff, let's talk about the youth side of things.
for sure.
Before you get into some of the experiences you had as a youth pastor and a youth leader, what do you think's the one thing that people underestimate about teenagers? Because you said it, you don't realize what they're going through. What's the
Yeah.
one thing you think people underestimate about them?
That they can serve now. I think for me, it's like we look at teenagers like they're our future. And I know you've heard me say this many times. They're our church now. Yes, they are the people that are going to continue, and we're going to pass the baton on to. But right now they need to be involved, and not only do they need to be involved, they want to be involved. And so I think that's something that we underestimate. We look at them like, oh, they're teenagers, they're not responsible, they're not capable. And I think that's totally false. I think that they are. And I've seen teenagers lead Bible study. I've seen some teenagers lead Bible studies better than adults.
Mm.
And that's a no slam on adults. It's just that we've had some really polished, sharp teenagers that have done well. And when we just imagine you get these young people serving right now, and seeing them thrive and enjoy. We have our teens on our worship team. They sing every Wednesday. They're more likely to continue serving because they love it. And as they have spiritual gifts too. Why are we waiting till they're adults to place them in those areas? They have a spiritual gift to sing. We want to
Mm.
put them in that place now. And as they thrive, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to stay in church.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
so that's one thing I would say is like, you know, just don't we underestimate their even their potential, and we think, oh well, in 10 years, but no, they need to be serving right now.
I think that's massive, especially in today's day and age, and where we're at in 2021. I know people like to say, kids are a lot dumber than they used to be. Kids aren't as smart as they used to be. I think it's on the contrary. I think they're a lot smarter right now. They're so much more switched on than they ever have been in the past. I think the one
Okay.
thing they lack is motivation, and they're lazy because all they want to do is play Fortnite. But that's fair enough.
Yeah.
But they're a lot smarter. They get it. TikTok,
Mhm.
as weird as an app that might be, it's taught them video editing skills, for example.
Right.
It's taught them creativity. It's taught them how to present something. And I think if
Mm.
we look at it from that perspective, you can see, okay, hold on a minute. Our teens actually can contribute a lot more to the church than we're giving them credit for.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they can be key integral parts of your ministry, and we do have to give them the benefit of the doubt, like you're saying. So
No, I agree with you because we do the same here. I mean, we have our teens on stage. They sing every Sunday. They also help lead our kids programs down here as well. That it's just so important to do that because, like you said, it develops a love for ministry.
right.
That's how my love for ministry developed. Someone trusted
Yeah.
me to do a slideshow for a service at one point. I think I was 11.
Yeah.
And then from that, it just developed and grew. And I think it's important that we nurture that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I've been in places too where adults basically just talk about how much they hate their job being in, and they're in ministry.
Mm.
And what do you think the team's going to do? You think they're going to want to be in ministry?
Yeah.
No, they're not going to want to be in ministry.
Mm.
And when we show them and have them be a part of what God can do through a yielded vessel, it's pretty remarkable. And
Yeah.
I think that we look at it like, well, why aren't there teenagers that want to be pastors or youth pastors or teachers? Well, because we as adults have pushed them out of the church as
That's
teenagers.
right.
So why do you expect them to be that now?
Yeah. And I don't think they see it. It's something that I've spoken to our leaders and our pastor about a lot. I don't think they see ministry as an option.
Right.
A lot of people out there look at ministry and say, that's for a specific set of people.
For
That's
sure.
for a specific type of person. No, if God's
Mm.
called you to it, he's called you to it, and he can
Right.
help you get there. Don't discount yourself in that area.
Absolutely.
So you get into youth ministry. What's the years in youth ministry been like? What's it been like being a youth pastor?
Oh man, I loved it, and this is a bittersweet transition for me for sure. You know, I just really in my life, I just like hanging out with young people.
Mhm.
Seeing their potential, but also just I'm a teenager still at heart. I think I probably always will be. I like to have fun and different things like that with them, but just having being a part of the future, being a part of them in the present. It's just, I feel like I've received such a blessing from them, probably even more of a blessing than I've given them.
Mhm.
It's just seeing, as they blossom, and walking through difficult times in their life, and seeing a kid that, maybe walked away from the Lord and it comes back to the Lord, and uh, they're trying to figure it out. They're trying to
Yeah.
figure out what they believe. They're trying to figure out who they are. They're trying to figure those things out, and having a small part in that is just pretty amazing. And so, over the years, it's like, you have your ups and downs. You have good youth activities, you have bad youth activities, you have you have you have easy parents, and you have difficult parents, and you have a little bit of everything. I'm not going to say it was easy,
Mm.
but one thing that I can tell you is it was worth it. And if anyone is interested in being a youth leader, or a youth worker, or youth pastor, I would just encourage you to pray about it. And I don't think you'd regret it. And I know the teens get this, they get this label on them, as we've mentioned, just that they're slackers, or that there's just some things in their life that one way or another would detract them from being someone you would want to work with.
Yeah.
And for me, it's just like, I so total opposite. It's if it wasn't for God moving me, I'd do it the rest of my life.
100%. Okay. We'll put you on the spot then.
Yeah, for sure.
Best youth program you put together, worst youth program you put together.
Oh man.
What's the best event, worst event?
I've had some. So we had one here in Minnesota, and if any of you are up on Dude Perfect, I don't know if you've seen Dude Perfect.
Yeah,
With
seen
the
those
trick
blokes.
shots and stuff. So it was a popular thing. It's still pretty popular right now. And this is probably about 5 or 6 years ago. So I'm like, man, they love it, and I'm trying to get something. So we're gonna do a Dude Perfect youth activity. Well, the only problem is they couldn't make anything. So we should have called it Dude Imperfect. And it just got to a point to where we had to try all these trick shots, and no one was making anything. People were getting frustrated. It just was not good. And I haven't done it since. Maybe if we did it more as Dude Imperfect and made a joke of ourselves or something, or maybe I needed to make it easier. I don't know. But we did that. That wasn't that great. So that was pretty awful. Honestly, some of the best ones that I did in Minnesota, so middle of winter, we would have our banquets, and we would roast a pig. And so,
Really?
yeah, so that was
That's
pretty
quality.
fun. So, you think in Minnesota, you don't really think of people roasting a pig. And we had a Christian school. And so every class, it was like a field trip out to see the pig being roasted, so that was pretty awesome. And, that was just a lot of kids ended up coming and being a part of that. And we were thankful for that. And then, I would say in Florida, we've had some really productive youth activities. We call them our teen wars, and we've done different things. Like we've done soda wars, which we did like Coke versus Pepsi. We did sneaker wars. We did like Nike versus Adidas, stuff like that. And we split the teams up, and we really push for it. Then I do something crazy every year during this. So
Okay.
I think the first year they shaved my head. So I grew my hair out for like 2 months, and they got to shave my head if we hit 100 people. And then last year I was eat the hottest chip. So that was,
nice.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting.
So you put yourself through a lot of pain then.
Yeah, it's worth it, man.
That.
I feel like as a youth pastor, you got to go all out.
I love it.
Feel like if you're not, and this year our youth group was really liking the Dude Perfect thing this year. And so we did the wheel unfortunate. So if you ever see Dude Perfect, they spin this wheel of these unfortunate things that you may have to do. And so I did one, if we hit 50, 75, or 100, so one of them was I had to dye my eyebrows pink. So I did it temporarily, but I had my eyebrows pink for a while. And then each year we do where if you bring a visitor, they got to put a pie in my face. So that was part of it. So it was just this big event. But we'd have kids, and they just go and invite their friends. And, each year we'd have several come. And so, we saw multiple kids saved through that. I think the
That's
first
awesome.
year we had 16 kids saved. And so that was a blessing. And then, honestly, as far as kids, they always enjoy lock-ins. As adults, we do not. But
Yeah.
you know, so those have been really popular here as well. But those are just a few of the ones that have gone well. And then the other one was probably our worst one.
Well, mate, you just gave me a lot of ideas to put our youth leader through, so I'm loving life right now. Um,
Yeah,
then you move over. God calls you into pastoring. What was
yeah,
that call like? What did it feel like knowing that God had called you to this role?
right. It was a wrestling match. I'll be
Hmm.
honest. Again, and not to keep repeating myself. And I'm being very sincere with this. This is a very bittersweet moment. I'm leaving kids that I dearly love, and I mean, when I told them, there was not a dry eye in the room. It hit home. I had a young man come up to me and afterwards said, "Sorry, I couldn't say much. I was kind of in shock. You're like my dad. He doesn't have
Mm.
it. His dad passed away when he was one, and that's
Oh,
that's just some of the roles as youth leaders that you play in these kids' lives, and sometimes you don't even realize it.
yeah.
And so, I truly, genuinely love these kids, and so what is wrestling with the fact of like, why do I want to leave an area where I'm comfortable? An area that where these kids, every day I wake up and I'm excited to go to their basketball game, or I'm excited to see them in youth group, or, I mean, you talk about people that hate their jobs, and you talk about people that absolutely, like, they wake up and they love it and they can't wait to go. That was me. I loved it. I've had jobs that I disliked very much, and this is being a youth pastor was not one of them. And then, so it was wrestling in that fact, but it was also wrestling because I wasn't sure what exactly I wanted to do. I knew God had called me to pastor, and I was thinking, maybe when I am around 40 years old, that seemed, like a good time. And I'm that type of person. I always like to forecast, like, okay, here's my goals. This is what I want to do by the time. I had a bucket list that was like, I want to do 30 things before I'm 30, and it had like 130 things on it. And I had one. And then I finished a lot of those, and I'm like, I want to do 40 things before I'm 40. And so I'm always someone that kind of has these things in line, like, these are the goals that I want to have, and I want to do it by this time. And so, that was part of it, wrestling with, am I really ready for this? And again, people probably have said this many times, but I don't think you're ever fully ready. Uh,
100%.
but so there was a wrestling with that. And then again, wrestling with, like, I teach at the college, as we've mentioned. Is my next role going to teach, and then maybe launching into pastoring at some point? I really have had a desire of training future leaders, and whether that be through a college, which I'm thankful with our college, I can still continue to teach and pastor at the same time. But then also, when you look at some of these things, as far as I'm going, do I want to teach? I want to train future leaders. Well,
Yeah.
what does a pastor do? You're training future leaders.
Yeah.
You're and at our church right now that I'm going to in Ohio, they have so much potential. And there's so many. One of the first things they told me is, we have a lot of guys that feel like they're called to preach. Well, what am I going to be doing? I'm going to be training future leaders. And God really has just opened doors and opened my eyes. And and really, when it all came about, my pastor had called me in. Okay. And we talk a little bit in our college classes about transitions, but my pastor called me in and was like, Eric, uh have you been thinking about being a pastor? And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, am I in trouble? Type of thing. But no, he was just like, God has just really been putting it on my heart that. And he's like, I even called, and he called Pastor Skelly, who's the college is based out of his church. And
Mm.
he's like, I asked him, and he's like, well, I think Eric should already be a pastor, and you should just ask him. And so I'm asking you, what do you think? And I was like, honestly, Pastor, I've been wrestling with this for like the last 6 months. And I think this is where God wants me to go. And, I'm the type of person that needs a little bit of a nudging, and God knows that, I think. And so, and this time he put it on my pastor's heart to encourage me. And honestly, it really came together pretty quickly. When we went up to Minnesota, or up to Ohio, we really fell in love with the people. It's just crazy. The church is on like 13 acres of land, and
Awesome.
right across, it's like 2 miles away from the freeway. And then right across from the church, they're building 500 new homes. And on the other side of the church, they're building 250 new homes. So
Wow.
we're going to have 750 homes right around our church. And that's what a local church is. So
That's
we
awesome.
are, in a sense,
Yeah.
I'm being called to reach those 750 homes plus the other people in our community. And there's just so much potential. And I'm looking forward to what God's doing. And so I would say, yeah, it was that call. It was a wrestling thing because, again, I had to set aside my fleshly desires, my being comfortable, and step out by faith. I had to step out of the boat a little bit.
And if God's calling someone to do something different, whether it be pastoring, preaching, just starting a new job, and they're wrestling with that, how do they let go? How do they let go and allow God to work?
I don't know if anyone else is, other people may be different. But I think that you have to be in tune with God. Because like if you're not in tune with God, and and what I mean by that is taking time in your devotional life, taking time in your prayer life, and a lot of times we talk about reading your Bible and praying. We don't talk enough about fasting and meditation.
Yeah.
And taking the time, setting aside time where just you and God get together. And when you're in tune with God, it's a lot easier to understand. And I think it kind of goes back to get your gospel identity, because ultimately we are God's,
Yeah.
and so when we realize who we are, and again we become a yielded vessel to Him, it's a lot easier to let go, even when it is this I mean, and then the peace that He gives you when you do that. I mean, people may look like, I have people that would be like, why would you leave such a good situation? And it's like, well, it's hard for me maybe to understand that, but God knows.
Mhm.
God put me in this, and what I'm doing is I'm trusting God. And how can we trust God, and how can we have faith in God to let go if we're not in tune with God? And so what I'm saying here is, look at God told Abraham to go, and Abraham went. He didn't even ask where necessarily, he just went,
Yeah.
and if we have that type of mentality, and I think that the key thing there is Abraham was listening to the voice of God. And so if you're listening to the voice of God, it makes it a lot easier to let go than if you think about it. If I wasn't in tune with God, of course I'd be staying because my flesh would be telling me to stay. And instead, God can help us to do the difficult things.
Mm. Well, I love that. And man, I want to thank you for joining us today. But before we do finish off, we ask every guest this. I give you a DeLorean and I send you back in time. I send you back 10 years. You have to tell Erik 10 years ago one piece of advice to get him through. What are you telling him?
One piece of advice.
One piece of advice.
Oh man, there's a lot I would tell myself. I would say, don't worry.
Okay.
Don't worry. And what I mean by that is, I'm a worrier I'm a worrier just to, my I am a worrier by generation. My family, from my mom, my grandpa, on down, we worry. And you know, just understanding that, good or bad, that understanding that God has me. And you know you think, in just even in Matthew 6, it talks a lot about that, where it talks about basically, why are you worrying? And my mom used to always tell me, why worry when you can pray?
Yeah.
And I think for me, that worrying, and that, it got, at times it got to my mental and even my mental health, in a sense. And so, learning just to think on right things, and cast down, those imaginations. And there's too many things that I either lost sleep over, or I worried about, that ultimately, if I would have just realized that God had it under control, it would have helped me tremendously.
Well, don't worry. And you'd be giving him the right piece of advice, because it looks like things are going pretty well. Pastor, once again, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. If the people want to follow you online, if they want to find you online, where can they find you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Instagram. I think you can just search my name, but I'm the McKay 4 is the tag. So there's 4 of us. So, and then on Facebook, it's Erik McKay. So just search Erik McKay with a K, Erik. And then on Twitter, it's Erik M30, Erik M30. So I'm on all 3 social media platforms there. So
That's awesome. Well, ladies and gents, as you know, that will be in the description below. Make sure you're following Have a Chat with Ray and Stat on all the social media platforms. Let us know who you want on the show next. Keep this thing going. And Pastor, thanks for talking to me.
Amen. I had a great time. Thank you.